Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, everybody. We're glad to have you join us today to talk about expert insights on cutting-edge API testing solutions. I have a couple of guests with me today. We have Daryl Kent, who's a field CTO and analyst at GigaOm. How you doing, Daryl?
I'm doing outstanding. How about yourself?
Great, great. Glad to have you. And we have Nathan Jakubiak from Parasoft, who's a senior director of development. Good morning there, Nathan. How you doing?
Hi, Arthur. I'm great today. Hope you're well.
Yep, yep. So we're going to have an interesting back and forth discussion, but I think before we start the discussion part, we want to give some context about what we're talking about today. And we are going to discuss not just API testing, but the GigaOm radar on API functional testing.
The goal of the radar is to match and align buyers' needs and requirements to sellers' capabilities, their ability to execute the operational fit, the vision, and the commitment they might have to the market. The role of analyst research in that decision making, from our perspective, is it's the critical resource for comparing and contrasting, in this case, API testing solutions based on comprehensive evaluation criteria. For this report, there are 27 different criteria. They include table stakes of 5 criteria, deployment model, key technical capabilities, which is the largest portion of the evaluation, and then business operational considerations along with emerging technologies. For the purpose of the radar and the positioning that you see on the screen for the various vendors, we use key technical capabilities and business operational considerations because that's what we're trying to align. End users and providers aligning technical capabilities with business considerations. You'll see that it's multidimensional. There are 4 quadrants and or 4 hemispheres, if you will, quadrants. The upper is maturity, the lower innovation, to the left on your screen, feature play and innovation play. What those really mean are, that's one dimension. The other dimension is whether or not you're a leader, challenger, or an entrant. And then the third dimension is where are you placed and what is your direction? So it's a multi-dimensional nuanced report. Maturity is not necessarily maturity as you might expect that definition to be. What it really is we expect that if you were to buy an API testing platform and the provider was in the maturity space, that over the course of the contract or the 12, 18, 24 months of use, it would remain relatively stable. Innovators tend to innovate and they do it relatively quickly. And when they do, it can be disruptive. So as an end user provider, they are interested in how they're able to handle that disruption. Feature play and platform play is really around. Platform play is meant to be a collection of capabilities that services 80% or higher of the requirement in that platform space. So it's in the 80th percentile, whereas feature is typically in the 20th percentile. And so in this case, you'll see that Parasoft is in the leader quadrant. They're closest to the center. The goal is to get to the center, because if you can get to the center, you are highly capable in you're complete in your offering, and you're extremely capable in your execution and your strategic vision, along with you are less disruptive to the operation. No one ever makes it to the center because the center tends to move with the market, but Parasoft is extremely close. What we have found in terms of capabilities and features, modern API testing solutions must offer comprehensive testing capabilities, including support for various API types and advanced testing strategies. AI, you can't talk about any technology these days without talking about AI. So they are reshaping testing approaches, offering more intelligence and efficient ways to create and manage tests. I believe we're going to have a segment on that as well. So what you're looking for as a provider is, does it fit your operational model, your ability to handle risk or not? And is it innovating? Are they moving? Are they a leader? Are they moving with market? Are they moving behind market or moving ahead of market? And how does that fit your operational model? It should be based on how well those features and capabilities align with your testing goals and requirements. And you should consider, for future proofing, vendors that are innovating and incorporating technologies like AI, ML, to ensure the solution remains relevant.
What I wanted to do today was go over a couple of these criteria that we thought were kind of interesting and maybe differentiating, and let especially the two of you talk about the importance of this criteria. What are things people should be looking for, etc.
Let's go quickly over the definitions. Mock testing. API development requires both a client and a server to be useful. So the ability to answer API calls without writing code, or to make an API call without processing the results, allows developers to move forward with their development. Mocking simulates the missing side of an API exchange. Mock data generation is about APIs, and by extension, API tests. They require data. I mean, it's as simple as that, but data is not always available. So the ability to create data or mask existing validated is imperative to all testing. Often it has to be generated by hand. So if you can do that in a fashion as Parasoft does, it speeds time to value, time to concept, etc. Service virtualization, similarly, is vital for simulating the behavior of components that the application under test interacts with, but are not available or practical for testing in a real environment. So what you're doing is you're setting up a valid, useful mock testing, mock data generation service at a total environment, if you will. Parasoft tools provide extensive support for creating sophisticated mocks with configurable responses and behaviors. That enables more precise and flexible testing. Your integration into automated testing frameworks can streamline the pipeline, enhancing reliability and speed. Some of the best data creation capabilities in the market are provided by Parasoft. With masking generation, automated detection of the data model to create a test data that can be customized, whatever your needs are. And what you're looking for a lot of times is edge cases, mimicking production data, data format variations, and error conditions without breaching privacy or security regulations. That's the value. And relative to the service virtualizations, Parasoft is distinguished by your ability to create high fidelity simulations of APIs, databases, and other services.
Yeah, for me, mock testing and service virtualization are generally the same. I'd probably think of service virtualization maybe as a more mature form of basic mocks. What you see today with testing applications is you're rarely testing a single service or a single application in isolation from whatever else it depends on. So I think that's why if you're with an API testing tool, if you're testing a particular service, that service often depends on a lot of other services, whether it's other services that your company built, or maybe it's third-party services provided by some partner. Either way, your service doesn't operate in isolation. And so having the ability to create mocks that mock out those particular services can be very important. And there's a number of reasons. We tend to use the term the ABCDs of service virtualization. So when you talk about A, you're talking about availability. So maybe the service isn't available. Maybe a different team in your company is still building it, so you can't even test against it yet. And so you don't want to block your own development while you're waiting for them to build it. B would stand for behavior. Daryl alluded to this a little bit, but you want to control how the thing behaves, and you don't just care about the normal happy path. You care about the error conditions. What happens if this dependent service returns a bad error? Does my service respond properly and handle it properly? So behavior, controlling the behavior is very important. The C stands for cost. And when you're talking about cost, you're thinking about a third-party service that you might actually have to pay to access, and that will constrain your testing. So if you don't want the constraints, you can virtualize or mock that service, and now you have control and you can test as much as you need to. And then D stands for data, which Daryl was talking about. So oftentimes you need lots of different kinds of data to test all kinds of different scenarios. And so it can be very important to be able to generate that data in a way that fits your services and what you need to test.
Yeah, I think what you've defined there is a holistic environment in which you can play, if you will, without impact to the organization, and to get a broader end-to-end 360 view, which is what you would like to have before you ever move into production.
Let's talk about environment testing. And I didn't know if you wanted to like frame it again there for us, Daryl.
I'll give it a go. You know, I like the way Nathan explained my framing, but I'll give it a go. Environmental testing, or environment testing, is APIs just, they don't run in a vacuum. You know, it's almost as simple as that. And so what you're looking for is the ability to answer questions like, will this test fail if there are changes in the environment, OS, hosting, variables, and if so, can we find a specific cause, even if it's not in the code under test? You know, so the importance of environmental testing is in real world validation, issue identification, or deployment readiness. Usage is around multiple environment simulation, configuration testing, performance, scalability. How's it actually going to be used?
When I think of environment testing, I think of it as a very mature form of service virtualization, because mocks and service virtualization, you're often thinking about, you're setting up a virtualized version of individual components to meet particular needs that you have. But when you start talking about environment testing, you're thinking about, how do I deploy an environment that allows me to test a given scenario that my service or my application needs to undergo. But you probably don't only have one, you probably have multiple different configurations and environments that you need to test. And so from the Pearsoft side, we view, from the testing perspective, we take an environment-based approach to testing, where we allow you to define what your environment should look like. So when I'm testing my service, what are all the dependent services? What states do they need to be in? Are they live? Are they virtual? Which data do the virtual ones have? And you can effectively define them as these deployable packages. And then you can, for a given set of tests, you can deploy one package and run your tests. Then you tear that down and you deploy a different package and run a different set of tests, and so on and so forth. We like to call that deploy and destroy, but it's something that you could easily integrate into a CI/CD pipeline, where you can, at the start of the pipeline, you deploy the environment, you run the tests, you tear it down. Then you might deploy a second environment, run the tests, and tear it down. And it allows you to package everything and make it really easy to execute and run on demand as needed.
It's very similar to modern cloud operations. It's an instance-based type of approach. And you know, I might have written perfect code. I might have called the APIs specifically and accurately, but I don't want to find out that it's not working properly if it ever gets into production. You know, so the sandbox is exactly that. You are developing that environment as a safe place to play, experiment, develop, and because at the end of the day, operational issues may ultimately turn into liability and brand issues if they're not tested properly and in an environment where you can test comprehensively.
Yeah.
And I think it can be really important. It's really nice when you're able to, say you're early on in the development of your service, the environment that you're testing against, everything might be mocked. But at one point, once you're ready to deploy it live, the ability to take that same set of tests and now just change the environment. So now it's deployed against all the live services, right? But it's the same set of tests that you already validated against the mocks, right? It gives you a lot of confidence once that, you're able to get it through the live services.
Yeah, you're trying to eliminate all the unknowns. As we know, these are machines. This is code. Stuff happens, but the more you can eliminate before reality hits, the better it is. And so these are almost. I'm shocked they're not table stakes at this point. But the fact that that Parasoft is providing them to the extent you are is where the real value is.
Yeah, so let's talk about the fun thing, right? AI is always the elephant in the room these days, and the interesting thing is that, you know, the opportunities for AI, machine learning, and LLMs to improve software testing is huge, right? Anywhere from creating tests, executing tests, making sure that the tests are efficient, self-healing, impact analysis so that we only run, you know, exactly the right number of tests so that we can improve speed to deployment and speed through test and things like noise reduction. So there's just lots, and that's just off the top of my head when I was putting this together. But yeah, let's talk about what can AI ML do today? What should we be looking for? And what are the new things that are emerging that we expect tomorrow?
Yeah, that's a good list. I'd like to add AI can also allow you to increase your test coverage and your test quality because it can operate much more quickly than a human typically, and it can operate like many humans based on the learning model, and it's continuously learning and improving. So increasing the test coverage and quality, you know, a logistics company might use it to generate diverse and complex shipment data, including unusual weights and dimensions and balance to test their shipment scheduling APIs, uncovering issues, of course. The other one I would add is predictive analytics. It starts not only thinking like us, it knows how we might act and can predict and kind of take an old west approach of heading them off at the pass.
Yeah, so I'll mention a few things that in our API testing solution that we've done with AI. So primarily we focused it so far. I mean, we're constantly doing a lot of research and development, so more things will be coming. But what we have in the products today is the ability to generate API test scenarios in a couple of different interesting ways. So one is a component that we call our Smart API Test Generator. We've actually had this for a few years now, but it will look at traffic that you capture either while you're recording in a browser. It can capture the underlying API calls that are being made to the backend, or it can be traffic that you captured with some proxy between some of your components on your backend. But in either case, it can take that traffic, analyze it, and produce a fully functioning API test scenario.
Right.
So what's interesting about this is it makes it a lot easier and quicker to build API test scenarios. Especially, we find that, you know, a lot of our clients, I mean, they're doing API testing, but either they're new to it or they're not as experienced in it. And there's a lot of things you have to tie together when you create an API scenario, right? It's not just a sequence of calls, but a lot of times you have one API returns data that needs to get injected into the next call and things like that. And, you know, our Smart API Test Generator can actually identify those parameters and parameterize those values and, you know, create the sequence of calls.
Yeah.
One piece of it that I didn't mention yet, which is the ability to learn from how people on my team may have already configured test scenarios. So I may have configured certain APIs, we need certain kinds of validations, or we need to extract certain data from them. And we can actually teach it that, and it can learn that. And so the next time when you create a scenario, you can apply what it learned to that, and those scenarios automatically get smarter, get built more quickly because it's learned from what I or others on my team have already done.
That's the whole premise, is it's constantly learning,
Right.
constantly.
So with that in mind, let's have Nathan was going to show us a little bit. So let's switch over.
Okay, yeah, so I am going to demonstrate a couple of our AI capabilities. And first, I actually will show you the Smart API Test Generator and how it works in SOATest. So to do that, I am going to record a scenario in my browser. This is an app where I can place orders. So I am going to start recording. And as I record through the application, it's going to be recording all of the API calls that I make underneath. or that the application makes under the hood. So I'm going to go through a simple scenario that adds something to a cart. This is a kind of inventory management system for shipping inventory between stores. So I'll just go through the scenario, place the order, and then once I place the order, I might want to review that it got placed. You'll notice that every time I place a new order, I get a new order number. So I'll just sign out, and that's my scenario. So I can stop recording, and I'll give it a name, and simply tell it to create the asset. Now, when I create the asset, I am going to switch to SOATest, our API testing solution, and I will be able to look at the test case that just got created. So here I see my place order test. And you'll first notice that it's a sequence of API calls. So it recorded a lot of the different API calls that happened underneath the hood. And I want to point out just a few things that it did as it created the scenario. So I showed you the dynamic order number when I viewed the order that I placed, and we can see that in this API call. But what you'll notice is that the definition of the test scenario has parameterized that value. So it identified that that order number actually comes as a result of a call made in test 21, and test 21 is the call where we actually place the order. If I look at that test, I see what we call a JSON data bank, which is a tool that's used for extracting data from a JSON response to an API call. So the Smart API test generator automatically identified that data and parameterized it in the subsequent call. Another thing that you'll notice if I look at test 21 is I also have an asserter that got added. And an asserter is basically another different kind of tool that performs assertions on different elements of the JSON payload. In this particular case, we can see that it decided that we should add an assertion for the receiver. The Smart API test generator will identify interesting assertions that it needs to add. The last thing that I want to point out is that in this scenario, it also included a reference to a reset test. And this came from learning how I've previously configured tests for this set of APIs. So in previous tests, I had configured it to reset the database because I always want the database to be in a clean state before I perform the tests. So it learned that, and it automatically added that into the scenario. So this is just a few examples of some of the smart things that it did when it created the test scenario. You'll notice I can go ahead and run it, and everything's green. It's a fully functioning test scenario. If I look at the traffic response in that last test, you'll see it actually parameterized it. It reset the database, so it reset the order counting, and you can see that it actually used the live real number that got parameterized. This is, I don't have time to go into much more, but this is an example of how we can apply AI to make creation of API test scenarios quick and efficient. One other thing that I want to show also in the AI space and also in the test generation space, test creation space, is how we can generate test scenarios from open API definitions. But I mean, we've been able to do that for years. So in some sense, that's not new, being able to analyze an open API specification and generate API clients from it. But what's new for us in the last release is the ability to ask OpenAI or Azure OpenAI to generate a test scenario based on the open API specification. And so I'll show you that now. The usage of OpenAI and Azure OpenAI is completely voluntary. We have it controlled by license features, so companies who aren't comfortable with it don't have to enable it, and their users won't have access. But if you do, it is something that you want to do, it's available to you. So I'm going to choose to create a test from my open API definition, and I'm going to tell it to create test scenarios. So what's interesting about this is I can provide it some guidance on how I want it to create the test scenario. So I'm going to look at a previous prompt that I built. And in this case, it's an open API for the same application that I just showed you. So I'm going to ask it to generate a test scenario that adds an item to the cart, places an order, views the placed orders, and then views the specific order that I just placed. This is actually basically what I just did. So I'll tell it to generate. And in this particular case, it's sending my custom prompt along with summarized information about the Open API specification. And we have some of our own proprietary prompting under the hood. That's all getting sent to OpenAI, and it's going to propose one or more test scenarios for me. So in this case, it proposed a single test scenario. So it shows me the sequence of API calls. And it allows me to choose. So I might know in a part that, for instance, okay, this particular one is not the one I want. So this goes to the, trust but verify, right? So it's not perfect. In this case, it actually got the 4 that I wanted. This one is not actually needed. So I'm going to uncheck that. And then I'll just tell it to finish. And when I do that, you'll see that it creates the same kind of API scenario that I showed you when we created from traffic. But now this is one that got generated from analyzing the Open API specification. So in this case, it's something I can apply when I don't have traffic, and it allows me to give it input about what I want it to create for me. You'll notice it applies some of the same kind of rules. So it learned, it applied the reset database test like I did in the previous scenario. So it's learning or applying the learning in the same way as when I create from traffic. So it's just one more way that users can create tests more quickly and more efficiently. So I don't have much more time today, but you could always reach out to us if you want to see more, because we have a lot of exciting things to show. So.
Wow. Reducing complexity. It's kind of what goes on behind the curtains. You make it look easy.
That's the goal. We try to make things that people can actually use, as opposed to that just chat box in it somebody could go to ChatGPT for. So
a lot of room for error. That eliminates a lot of that. The productivity is clear. I've said for years that relative to data storage devices, if you knew what went on inside these things, you'd never put a lick of data on them. and it's kind of the same thing here. Yeah. It's difficult to do and do correctly and do comprehensively.
Absolutely. So that's cool. Like Nathan just mentioned, if you want to get a fuller demo or get a trial of the product, talk to somebody about it, you can absolutely do it. I'll have a QR code just a moment for you, or if you got a specific question, again, we're available to answer your question. So hit that Q button and put your question in, and we'll be able to handle that in just a moment here. Just a couple of quick things to wrap up. All of this stuff that you saw and more is available as part of the Parasoft continuous quality testing platform. So we have things for functional test automation, API test automation, performance test automation, code analysis, coverage, unit test, service virtualization, etc., all in a platform that's open, being able to connect to other parts of your DevOps environment to work with your other tools and reporting systems. It's actionable, so we can help you make sure that you get the work done the way you want, and using AI everywhere to do all kinds of cool things. So I just wanted to mention that. And again, of course, there's the radar report, and we did very, very well. We're a leader and a fast mover, so we're going in the right direction, going toward that impossible to reach center of the target there. But we're very proud of it. We encourage you to download the report and read it for yourself. The QR code on the right is the one that'll take you to the landing page. Fill it out, you get a copy of the report, and you can learn more about all of it. And on the left, if you want to get a trial for one of these many products that are available, and it might be that it's API testing, or it might also be that you're thinking now about unit testing or coverage or something. And so it's all there, and we're happy to have it. And with that, any summary statements before we go to Q&A, gentlemen? Nathan, I'll let you take first crack.
No, I think we're very excited about what we've built. It's a very mature product. It's been on the market many years, lots of happy customers. And we're very excited where we can go with the AI stuff. So
thanks. And Daryl, we're so happy to have you with us today. It's been fun working with you. And any summary words you want to give us?
Yeah, I'll kind of take it back to my opening statement. What we're trying to do is align and match capabilities to operational processes. And what you've shown here is you have the lowest risk, most comprehensive, most complete offering that could fit into any operational environment with the least amount of risk, easy to use, easy to implement, and quick time to value, quick time to deploy. So there's operational efficiency, there's customer intimacy there, and there's performance and product superiority that fit into any kind of transformational strategy that would be a value statement to any end user in this using this tool and for the organizations that are deploying it.
All right. Well, thank you both. It's been a fascinating discussion. And, as we talked about this, there's 27 points or whatever in this whole thing. And we could have spent like 10 minutes on each one if you want to sit and listen to us for the next 4.5 hours. But instead, we're going to take your questions live now. So again, click that Q box, get your question in there. And, if we're unable to answer it or you're watching a replay, send us an email, info@parasoft.com or go to our website and click that little chat bot and we'll still answer it. Doesn't have to be today right now, but we thank you so much for attending. If you've got future things that you'd like to see us cover, please let us know, and we'll be happy to make more content based on the kinds of things you're looking for. So again, thanks everybody. Well, so we do have some questions that have come in. Before I handle them, I just want to mention the questions that always get asked. Will there be a recording available for you to replay and share with your friends and things like that? We encourage you to do that. Share it with everybody. You'll get an email in the next day or two, and it'll give you exactly where you can go to rewatch it. And just a reminder, we put the link in the QR code a minute ago, but I've also got it in the chat box right now for downloading the report, as well as a link for trying to get a trial or a demo or things like that. So make sure you take advantage of those things. So one of the questions that came in was, what the most important thing to keep in mind when looking at API testing solutions? So either of you?
Someone to step up.
For me, I would look at ease of use. So one of the key capabilities is our what we call low code, no code platform. So at ease of use, how quickly and easily can I create my test scenarios? I think you're also looking at the type of technologies that you need to support. So, there's a lot of basic REST API testing solutions out there, but when you need in-depth features that have some of the complex capabilities we talked about today, like mocking or data, you might have wide variety of protocols or message formats you need to support. Then you need a tool that can support all those different things. And our tool is one such tool. So those are a couple of things that come to mind for me.
Yeah, the thing that I almost spewed out immediately was ease of use, because I tend to look at it from the operational and the business side. The functionality is tremendous, but the functionality enables things like agility, time to value, de-risk in terms of deployment. There is, your AI, you were able to show an AI within context, simulate what you showed it and recorded to create. All of those are turnarounds and agility. And you might have noticed I have a few gray hairs, and I've been doing this since the assembler days. And when I coded and developed, what we talked about was cycles measured in weeks, sometimes months. And if lucky, and it was simple, maybe a day or two. But what you showed is to be able to do iterations within seconds. And that is meaningful to productivity and time to value. So I would suggest that if you can create a holistic, complete environment and generate tests that have efficacy and effectiveness and efficiencies, that's what I would look for. I mean, you're not testing and developing particularly just to play. You're doing it to do something productive in a business. And so that's a tool like this is, if it can get it done quicker, more effectively, with better efficacy, then absolutely, that's what I would look for.
All right, great. There was
one more thing I might add, Arthur.
Sure. Sure.
You talked about fast movers and forward movers, and what I would also look for in the tool is, am I keeping up to market and customer demands? And the fact that Parasoft is a fast mover, it translates in our radars to exactly that. You're responsive to the market, and you are meeting the demands for innovation. So I would certainly look for that in the tool.
Yeah, these days with the AI stuff, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backward compared to everybody else.
Yeah.
So this one's probably aimed at you, Nathan. It says you talked about capturing traffic to create tests. Is this record and playback or something different?
Let's call it smart record and playback. So it's recording the traffic, but it is picking out the important API calls that were made under the hood. And it creates a test scenario that, quote unquote, does replay them, but it replays them with smart. So as I showed, it will parameterize dynamic data, create assertions, add things to the test that you might have added to other similar tests in the future or in the past. So it is a form of replay, but it's smart.
I would call it replay within context. It understands context. And so it's reducing noise.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is, if I want to buy a solution rather than open source, what's a good way to explain the value to my boss so I can get approval?
So since 1956, the answer has been it always depends. However, in this case, the dependency is on what's the budget level of your boss and what persona do they represent, because it's different. There's a functionality, there's a productivity budget, but where we find these things stall a lot is when you get into the executive levels, because they're looking for urgency. Why should I act? I mean, is good enough good enough? And so you have to not only be able to explain the technical capabilities, but the operational efficiency, the productivity, the measures to the business to get their attention.
All right, great. The next one says, should I start using these LLM enhanced tools today, or is it safer to just wait until it's more mature?
We had a sidebar in this when we were looking at setting up this webinar, and I think they're good to use today, but I would call them teenagers. The maturity of AI is in kind of a teenager state. It thinks it knows everything, and it will challenge you on whether or not you know. So it is a trust but verify, but they are very, very effective, especially if you set the narrative up to where the context is very clear, and they can then make AI can then make decisions around that context, like Nathan showed in the demo. So there's a data set that it learns from, a library it learns from, and if you can make that as clean and useful as practical, and then set the context, they are brilliant. They are, the latest iterations of AI are head and shoulders beyond just the previous generation, and they learned the previous generations trained them on the current releases. So I would say yes, they are useful to use.
Yeah, to add to that, we have clients that are in different stages. We have some clients who are chomping at the bit, trying to understand what they can do with these LLMs, including how our products integrate with them. And they're really excited to see what they can do. And they're building their own internal systems to leverage them as well.
Yeah.
Then you have others who are very hesitant. They're afraid of sharing data. And that's actually one reason why we support both the standard OpenAI and the Azure, because the Azure OpenAI is supposed to protect your data more. You have your own private sandboxes. But either case, we know that some people aren't comfortable, and so you can completely disable it and prevent your users from touching it.
Right. There is
yeah, go ahead.
There's the data concern. I would attribute it to something like, are you looking for somebody writing shotgun, companion, co-pilot, if you will, or are they riding in your car as a backseat driver and just sending you down paths you don't need to go down? So you just need to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, in all our research, we found that in our own internal usage, as we're developing on them, they do a lot of great things. Because it's so great, sometimes it can lure you to sleep to think that it's perfect, and it's definitely not perfect. So you have to maintain vigilance, but I would argue you really should be learning how to use them, because it does offer productivity gains. You just have to watch it and not blindly follow it.
I think that's the most valid point right there. And it comes back to what you mentioned earlier, trust but verify.
Mm-hmm.
It is easy to get dependent on them.
Yeah. Okay, so funny that we've been talking about privacy here, because the next question in the box was, we have to comply with various regulations about data privacy. It's been challenging because we can no longer just use things like traffic in our tests. What do you recommend?
I have a statement there. That is a strength of Parasoft in data generation. That's why you want the mock data generation, to ensure that you can generate the data that complies and is private, is masked properly. And in fact, even if you're using real data, it is protected. The mock data enables you then to generate it as if it was, and completely, I'm not going to say protected, but completely private, because it's mock. So this is, whoever asked that question is almost like a layup for Parasoft, I would think.
Yeah, I think the
I'm
ability
guessing.
to create the scenario and then provide your own mock data, as Daryl said, that's definitely one way to approach it. Another way to approach it is, rather than using the traffic, you use this open API scenario generation that I showed, and then combine that with your own mock data. That would cut the traffic completely out of the picture. So there's multiple ways to approach it.
It is, in our findings and in the radar, you will see we make this statement. It is the unique strength of the folks on this call. So if that's a concern, this is somebody you should have at the table. Parasoft is somebody you should have at the table to have a discussion.
Yeah, and so like I said, you can always hit us up on the website or email us. There's one more question here, and if anybody else has others that want to get in there, make sure you get it into the box. What's the next big thing we should be expecting from AI in testing? I guess they're asking us to be predictors of the future now, but what do you think?
I don't have it pulled up, but we touch on that in the radar, emerging criteria, and I haven't. I apologize, I don't have it at the tip of my fingers, but it becomes perhaps looking at your customer set and predicting what markets they might be getting into, and therefore what businesses they may be getting into, and therefore predicting what type of testing you may have to develop. It becomes more of a look ahead in my view. I don't know if that's practical or possible, but that's certainly AI has that capability. The more data you feed it, the more you open it up, the more predicting it gets, or it can get. And so maybe that's where, instead of doing what you would do in a test and development environment that is germane to your focus, you open up that focus and start thinking about what else could we do? Where else could we go? What else do we have to test to prepare for the business that may be expanding? That's one possibility.
Things that I think
Nathan, did you want
about.
to add?
Yeah, the things that I think about, and some of these we're at various stages. They are in play already in some ways, but I think they're going to continue to be developed. So looking at things like learning from how you create test scenarios to apply that to how you create your future scenarios, and making that more and more automatic. That would be one thing. A second thing would be further uses of self-healing. You're starting to see that a lot in UI testing, but I think that's going to span across some different kinds of tests, including API tests or who knows what else. I think you can look at things like test optimization, so identifying the specific set of tests that need to be run in a given context, speed up your CI/CD process. And then the last thing, I think we're going to start expecting a lot of analysis on the results to help you read through the results, understand what's important, what's not important, filter out the noise, that kind of stuff.
We call that. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
I'd say that was in the radar. Go ahead.
It is in the radar, AI ML for results filtering. You know, if there's no time to evaluate those results, then your testing almost becomes not worthwhile. So being able to filter those to what test teams must evaluate to a manageable subset has got practical application, and it's near term in terms of capabilities.
All right. Well, that was the last question on our list. I want to thank you both for joining with us today. It's been a fascinating topic, and all those who joined us as attendees, we're so glad you could make it. We hope to see you here next time. Thanks, and have a great day.